Hello, my friends. Welcome to Learning English with Nhat Lin. I'm very happy that you are here with me today. In this lesson, we are going to travel back in time to explore the history of how the Kingdom of England was formed. Before there were kings and queens, before there were castles and crowns, there was only an island in the mist. So take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let us begin our journey. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a cold island in the far northwest of Europe. Tall white cliffs rise above a restless sea. Thick forests cover the land. The air smells of salt and rain. There are no cities, no stone bridges, no towers reaching into the sky. Have you ever wondered what England looked like before it was called England? Thousands of years ago, long before written history, people were already living on this island. They hunted animals in the forests and fished in the rivers. They built simple homes from wood and mud. Over time, different tribes settled across the land. Among the most important were the Celts. The Celts were not one single united people. They were many tribes, each with its own leader and traditions. They spoke different forms of Celtic languages. They believed in powerful spirits of nature. Forests, rivers, and hills were sacred to them. Druids, who were religious leaders and teachers, guided their communities and preserved their stories through memory and spoken word. There was no single king ruling the whole island. Instead, small tribal kingdoms existed side by side. Some traded with each other, others fought for land and power. Life was often uncertain. Strength and loyalty were important values. Honor meant survival. The island was not called England. In fact, it did not yet have one name. It was simply a land of tribes shaped by wind, rain, and ancient traditions. But far to the south, across the narrow sea, a powerful empire was expanding. Its soldiers marched across Europe. Its engineers built roads and cities. Its leaders believed they could control the world. Soon, this island of mist and forests would catch their attention. And when they arrived, everything would begin to change. In the year 55 before Christ, a Roman general named Julius Caesar sailed across the narrow sea that separated the island from mainland Europe. He did not come to stay. He came to explore and to test the strength of the tribes who lived there. His visit was short, and the Romans soon returned to their empire. But Rome did not forget the island. Almost 100 years later, in the year 43 Anno Domini, the Roman Emperor Claudius ordered a full invasion. This time, the Romans came with thousands of soldiers, heavy armor, and clear plans. They did not simply visit. They came to conquer. An invasion is when an army enters a land by force in order to control it. The Celtic tribes fought bravely, but the Roman army was disciplined and organized. Step by step, the Romans pushed deeper into the island. They built forts to protect their soldiers. They constructed straight roads that cut through forests and hills. They created new towns with stone buildings, bathhouses, and marketplaces. One of these towns was Londinium. Today, we know it as London. For the first time, parts of the island became a province of the Roman Empire. A province is a region ruled by a larger empire. Roman law was introduced. Latin became the language of government and trade. Coins were used for money. Trade expanded. Wine, pottery, and new tools arrived from across Europe. The Romans also built Hadrian's Wall in the north of the island. This long stone wall was meant to protect Roman territory from tribes who lived further north. It was not just a wall of defense. It was a symbol of control. It showed where Roman power ended. Life on the island began to change. Some Celtic leaders worked with the Romans and gained wealth. Others resisted. One famous leader named Boudica led a rebellion against Roman rule. For a short time, she and her army burned Roman cities. But eventually, Rome crushed the revolt and restored its authority. For nearly 400 years, Roman influence shaped the southern part of the island. Roads connected towns. Trade routes grew stronger. Roman culture slowly mixed with local traditions. But empires do not last forever. By the early 5th century, the Roman Empire was facing serious problems. Attacks from other groups in Europe weakened its power. Rome needed its soldiers at home. Around the year 410 Anno Domini, Roman forces withdrew from the island. They left behind roads, towns, and walls of stone, but they also left something else, a power vacuum. A vacuum is an empty space where something once existed. Without Roman protection, the island became vulnerable. Old tribal rivalries returned. New groups from across the sea began to look at the land with interest. The Romans had brought order and structure. Now that structure was gone, and once again the island stood uncertain, waiting for the next chapter of its story. When the Roman soldiers left the island in the early 5th century, they took their protection with them. The strong walls and roads remained, but there was no powerful army to defend the land. The Celtic tribes who had once resisted Rome now faced a new danger. From across the North Sea, new groups began to arrive. They were the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. These were Germanic tribes from areas that are today part of Germany and Denmark. At first, some may have come as hired warriors, invited to help defend the island. But soon, they came in greater numbers. They did not only fight, they settled. A tribe is a group of people connected by family, culture, and leadership. As more of these tribes arrived, they pushed many of the Celtic people westward into areas that are now Wales and Cornwall. Over time, the Germanic settlers began to divide the land among themselves. Instead of one united country, there were many small kingdoms. Historians often speak of 7 main kingdoms during this period. This time is sometimes called the Heptarchy, which means the rule of 7 kingdoms. These included Northumbria, Mercia, Wessex, East Anglia, Kent, Essex, and Sussex. Each kingdom had its own king. Some were strong, others were weak. Alliances formed and broke. Battles were common. Borders changed often. Power shifted from one ruler to another. There was still no single ruler of the entire land, but something important was beginning to grow, a shared identity. The name England comes from the word Engla-land, which means the land of the Angles. Over time, the language spoken by these tribes developed into what we now call Old English. Many common English words today have roots in this early language. Language is powerful. It shapes how people think and see the world. As the Angles and Saxons settled and built communities, their language spread across much of the island. Another major change came in the late 6th century. Christianity began to spread among the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. In the year 597 Anno Domini, a monk named Augustine arrived from Rome. He was sent to convert the Anglo-Saxon kings to Christianity. Conversion means changing from one religion to another. Slowly, kings accepted the new faith. Churches were built. Monasteries became centers of learning. Writing returned to the island. Monks recorded history, copied books, and preserved knowledge. Christianity helped create connections between the kingdoms. It gave rulers a new sense of authority and unity. Religion began to shape laws, customs, and daily life. But unity was still fragile. Kings fought for dominance. Some dreamed of ruling not just their own land, but all the kingdoms. Occasionally, one king became powerful enough to be recognized as a leader over others. Yet this leadership was rarely permanent. The island remained divided, yet something was changing beneath the surface. The Angles and Saxons had transformed the land. Roman Britain was gone. Celtic rule had weakened in the east and south. A new culture, a new language, and a new political system had taken root. The foundations of what would one day become England were slowly forming. However, just as these kingdoms were finding their balance, a new and terrifying force appeared on the horizon. Long ships with carved dragon heads began to cross the sea, and with them came fire from the north. At the end of the 8th century, the people of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms saw something they had never seen before. Long, narrow ships appeared on the horizon. They moved quickly across the water. Their sails were large and square. At the front of each ship there was often a carved dragon's head. These were the Vikings. The Vikings came from Scandinavia, from lands that are today Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. They were skilled sailors, traders, and warriors. At first they came in small groups. They attacked coastal monasteries and villages. They moved fast, taking gold, silver, and supplies before sailing away. A raid is a sudden attack intended to steal or destroy. In the year 793 Anno Domini, Vikings attacked the monastery at Lindisfarne in Northumbria. This event shocked the Anglo-Saxon world. Monasteries were peaceful places of prayer and learning. They were not prepared for violence. The attack marked the beginning of a new and dangerous era. At first, the raids were seasonal. The Vikings attacked in the summer and returned home before winter. But over time, their plans changed. They began to stay. They built camps. They brought families. They wanted land. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, already divided, struggled to defend themselves. One by one, several kingdoms fell under Viking control. Large parts of eastern and northern England became known as the Danelaw, a region ruled by Danish Viking leaders. The word law here refers to a system of rules. In the Danelaw, Scandinavian customs and laws shaped daily life. Yet not all hope was lost. In the southern kingdom of Wessex, a young king rose to power. His name was Alfred. History remembers him as Alfred the Great. Alfred became king in the year 871 Anno Domini. At that time, Viking armies were strong and confident. They had defeated many Anglo-Saxon rulers. Wessex was one of the last independent kingdoms. Alfred faced defeat more than once. At one point, he was forced into hiding in the marshes. But he did not surrender. He reorganized his army. He built fortified towns called burhs to protect the land. He created a small navy to defend the coast. Alfred also understood that strength was not only about weapons. It was about knowledge and unity. He encouraged education. He supported the translation of important texts into Old English. He wanted his people to understand their own history and faith. After years of struggle, Alfred reached an agreement with the Viking leader Guthrum. The land was divided. Wessex remained free while other regions stayed under Danish control. For the first time, there was a clear effort to unite the English-speaking people under one ruler. Alfred called himself King of the Anglo-Saxons. Later rulers would expand this idea. The dream of a single kingdom united against outside threats began to take shape. The Viking Age was not only about destruction, it was also about exchange. Norse words entered the English language. Trade networks expanded. Cultures mixed in unexpected ways. But most importantly, the pressure from the north forced the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms to think differently. They could remain divided and fall one by one, or they could unite. The struggle against the Vikings planted the idea of one England. And yet, even after Alfred's victories, the island story was far from settled. In the year 1066 Anno Domini, another army would cross the sea, and this time the conquest would change England forever. The year 1066 Anno Domini is one of the most famous dates in English history. It was a year of confusion, ambition, and war. When King Edward, known as Edward the Confessor, died in January 1066, he left no clear heir to the throne. Without a strong successor, the crown became a prize that several powerful men desired. One of them was Harold Godwinson, a leading English noble. Shortly after Edward's death, Harold was crowned King of England. But he was not the only man who believed he had the right to rule. Across the English Channel in northern France lived William, Duke of Normandy. William claimed that Edward had once promised him the throne. He also claimed that Harold had sworn an oath to support his claim. An oath is a serious promise, often made before witnesses or under religious authority. William believed Harold had broken that oath. He began to prepare for invasion. Meanwhile, from the north, another challenger appeared. Harald Hardrada, King of Norway, also believed he had a right to the English crown. In September 1066, Hardrada invaded northern England. Harold Godwinson marched his army north and defeated the Norwegian forces at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. It was a hard victory. His men were exhausted. But even as Harold celebrated, news arrived that William of Normandy had landed on the southern coast of England with a large army. Harold had to march his soldiers south immediately. They traveled quickly, covering great distance in only a few days. On October 14, 1066, the two armies met near the town of Hastings. The Battle of Hastings lasted all day. The English army fought on foot, forming a shield wall on a hill. The Norman army attacked again and again. They used cavalry, archers, and careful strategy. By the end of the battle, King Harold was dead. William had won. A conquest is the act of taking control of a country by force. William soon marched to London. On Christmas Day in the year 1066 Anno Domini, he was crowned King of England. History remembers him as William the Conqueror, but his victory was not peaceful. Many English nobles resisted Norman rule. William responded firmly. He built stone castles across the land to control the population and defend against rebellion. The Tower of London is one of the most famous examples of these early Norman castles. William also introduced a new system of government known as feudalism. Feudalism was a system in which land was owned by the king and granted to nobles in exchange for loyalty and military service. The nobles, in turn, allowed knights and peasants to live and work on the land. This system strengthened the king's control. Loyalty flowed upward toward the crown. The Norman conquest changed more than politics. It changed the language and culture of England. The Norman rulers spoke French. For centuries, French became the language of the royal court and the upper class. Many French words entered the English language, especially in areas of law, government, and food. For example, the animal in the field might be called a cow, a word of Anglo-Saxon origin. But the meat served at a noble's table was called beef, from the French word bœuf. Over time, Old English and Norman French blended together. This mixture shaped the development of Middle English. The Norman conquest also connected England more closely to continental Europe. The King of England now held lands in France. Politics became more complex. Alliances shifted. For the first time, England had a strong, centralized monarchy. The power of the crown was clearer and more organized than before. The Battle of Hastings was not just another conflict between rival leaders. It marked a turning point. The Anglo-Saxon age had ended. A new England shaped by Norman rule had begun. And from this moment forward, the English crown would stand at the center of the kingdom's identity. After the Norman conquest, England was ruled by strong kings who believed their authority came from both tradition and divine right. William the Conqueror and his successors built castles, collected taxes, and demanded loyalty from nobles across the land. The monarchy became the center of power. But power, when too strong, often creates tension. Over time, conflicts began to grow between the king and his nobles. The feudal system had given land to powerful lords in exchange for loyalty. Yet these nobles did not always agree with royal decisions. They expected the king to respect certain customs and limits. In the early 13th century, this tension reached a breaking point under King John. King John ruled from 1199 to 1216. He was not a popular ruler. He raised heavy taxes to fund wars in France. Many of those wars failed, and England lost important territories. The nobles grew frustrated. They felt the king was abusing his authority. Authority means the official power to make decisions and enforce rules. In 1215, a group of angry barons forced King John to meet them at a place called Runnymede, near the River Thames. There, they presented him with a document that would change English history. This document was called the Magna Carta. Magna Carta is a Latin phrase that means Great Charter. It was a written agreement between the king and his nobles. The document stated that the king was not above the law. It declared that even the monarch had to follow certain rules. One of its most important ideas was that no free man could be punished without a fair trial. The king could not simply imprison someone without legal process. A charter is a formal written grant of rights or privileges. At first, King John did not truly accept the Magna Carta. Conflict continued after he signed it. But over time, the ideas inside the document became deeply important. Future kings were reminded that their power had limits. The Magna Carta did not create democracy. It did not give rights to everyone. Most ordinary people, especially peasants, still had little political voice. But it planted a powerful seed, the idea that law stands above rulers. As the centuries passed, another institution began to grow stronger. This was Parliament. Parliament developed from meetings between the king and his advisors. Over time, it included not only nobles but also representatives from towns and counties. These representatives helped approve taxes and discuss national matters. Parliament was not yet a fully independent body. The king still held great authority, but slowly, the balance between monarchy and law was shifting. England was becoming a kingdom where tradition, law, and royal power were closely connected. The crown remained a symbol of unity and strength. Yet the idea that the king must respect established rights became part of English identity. The story of England was no longer only about conquest and battle. It was also about negotiation and law. Castles still stood tall, kings still wore crowns, but beneath the surface a quieter transformation was taking place. The foundation of a constitutional monarchy, where power is limited by law, was slowly being built, and this balance between crown and law would shape the future of the kingdom for centuries to come. By the late Middle Ages, England had survived invasion, rebellion, and political struggle, yet stability was still fragile. The balance between noble families remained delicate, and royal power could weaken quickly if leadership was uncertain. In the 15th century, a new conflict erupted that threatened to tear the kingdom apart. This was the War of the Roses. The war was not a single battle, but a long series of conflicts between two powerful families, the House of Lancaster and the House of York. Each claimed the right to the English throne. The symbol of Lancaster was a red rose. The symbol of York was a white rose. For more than 30 years, England experienced civil war, shifting alliances, and sudden changes of kings. A civil war is a war fought between groups within the same country. During this period, loyalty was dangerous. Nobles switched sides. Kings were crowned and removed. The kingdom seemed unstable once again. In 1485, the conflict reached its turning point at the Battle of Bosworth Field. There, a young nobleman named Henry Tudor defeated King Richard III. Henry claimed the throne and became King Henry VII. Henry Tudor united the rival houses by marrying Elizabeth of York, combining the red and white roses into one symbol, the Tudor rose. This marriage symbolized reconciliation and unity. For the first time in many years, England began to experience lasting stability. Henry VII worked carefully to strengthen royal authority. He reduced the power of rebellious nobles and improved financial control. His goal was clear: prevent another civil war. His son, Henry VIII, would become one of the most famous monarchs in English history. Henry VIII is often remembered for his 6 marriages, but his reign had deeper consequences. In the 1530s, he separated the Church of England from the authority of the Pope in Rome. This event is known as the English Reformation. Reformation means a major change in religious organization or belief. By declaring himself the supreme head of the Church of England, Henry increased royal power even further. The monarchy was no longer only political, it became religious as well. Under the Tudor dynasty, especially during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, England grew more confident. Trade expanded. Exploration increased. A stronger sense of national identity developed. England began to see itself as more than just a collection of lands. It became a kingdom with a shared culture, language, and direction. The monarchy stood at the center of this identity. The centuries of invasion, division, and reform had slowly shaped a unified realm. The English language continued to evolve. Laws grew more organized. Parliament remained active. The relationship between crown and people became more defined. By the end of the Tudor period, England was no longer a fragile island of competing tribes and rival kings. It was a structured kingdom with a strong government and a clear sense of itself. The journey from Celtic tribes to Roman province, from Anglo-Saxon kingdoms to Norman rule, from rebellion to reconciliation, had created something lasting. England was no longer simply an island in the mist. It was a kingdom. When we look at England today, we often think of stone castles, royal ceremonies, and a crown that has existed for centuries. We see traditions that feel ancient and unchanging. But behind every crown lies a long and complicated story. England was not formed in a single moment. It was shaped slowly, layer by layer. First, there were the Celtic tribes who lived close to nature. Then came the Roman soldiers bringing roads and order. After them arrived the Anglo-Saxons, building kingdoms and shaping a new language. The Vikings tested the strength of those kingdoms and pushed them toward unity. The Normans changed the structure of power and the very sound of the English tongue. Later, kings and nobles argued over authority, leading to the Magna Carta and the growth of Parliament. Civil wars threatened stability, yet the Tudor dynasty brought consolidation and stronger national identity. Each chapter added something new. The Kingdom of England was not built only through battle. It was built through compromise, adaptation, and resilience. Invasions did not erase the past. Instead, they blended cultures together. Conflict did not destroy the kingdom forever. It forced it to grow stronger. The crown became a symbol of continuity. But the true foundation of England lies in its institutions, its laws, its evolving parliament, and its ability to balance tradition with change. Have you ever noticed how history is rarely simple? It is not only a story of heroes and villains. It is a story of people responding to uncertainty, of leaders making difficult choices, of ordinary lives shaped by great events. The formation of England reminds us that nations are not born perfect. They are experiments, they struggle, they adapt, they learn. Next time you see the white cliffs of Dover or hear about a royal ceremony in London, remember the centuries beneath those symbols. Remember the tribes who walked the forests, the soldiers who marched under Roman banners, the warriors who crossed the sea in wooden ships, the kings who fought, ruled, and negotiated. The Kingdom of England was not simply created. It was formed through time. And like all nations, it continues to carry the marks of its past. History is never only about crowns and castles. It is about the long journey that makes them possible.